Hi, my name is Andrej Kubovic. I work for ESET as Security Awareness Specialist, and today we are going to talk about ransomware. In 2020, pandemic was the most important topic everybody was talking about. And in the midst of it were hospitals, doctors and nurses, emergency systems, all of them desperately trying to save as many lives as possible. But COVID-19 wasn't the only thing that was putting the health of people on the line. In Germany, a cyber attack has brought a hospital to a screeching halt, rendering most of its systems non-functional, thus making any healthcare extremely difficult to provide. This was also true for a patient whose life was hanging by a thread and who was on her way to the facility. Due to the attack, the ambulance had to be rerouted to a different hospital that was further away. Unfortunately, despite the effort of the doctors, the patient did not survive. It was officially the first documented case where ransomware, in this instance by Doppelpaymer gang, could potentially be linked to a loss of a human life. But cases such as this one are only the tip of an iceberg, as organizations all around the world still suffer through similar incidents. It is no longer about that one individual patient in Germany. It is about cybercrime mutating into a beast that has impact on everyone, no matter the region, no matter the industry. Attacks such as the one in Germany represent a new cybercriminal wave, or a gold rush, if you will, with ransomware gangs being at its forefront. And let me assure you, the situation is really dire. Actually, it has never been worse. But to understand what is going on today, we need to rewind to a time before 2020, to November 2019, when May's ransomware started this new technique which didn't rely on encryption of victims' data and the subsequent ransom demand anymore. This new technique is called doxing, or double extortion. For those unfamiliar with the term, doxing means that the attacker hack or force their way into organization systems, find and extract valuable data, and threaten to leak or sell it online. Of course, unless the ransom is paid. It didn't take long for this innovation to become popular with others. Sodinokibi, Avadon, Klop, Doppelpaymer, Netwalker, Nemty, Nephilim, all of them followed Maze and started doxing their victims too. And ransomware gangs also became much more focused and much more targeted, finding their victims in almost every possible industry that showed even the slightest vulnerability, including military, public administration, and of course hospitals and emergency services. And if the initial intrusion was successful, cybercriminals made the most of it. They stole, they encrypted, and aggressively fought their way through the organization's environment and beyond. To make sure their demands were met, they applied surgeon-like pressure, finding ways how to force their victims into payment. If you want to know what those might be, let me give you a few examples. Let's start with DDoS attacks. The ransomware gang would hit victims' website with DDoS attack, which made it very difficult for the organization to communicate with its clients, with partners, or with the patients who were waiting to get their healthcare. Gangs also searched for printers in the network and used them to print ransom demands, so anybody who had access to them could see that something bad is happening. To make matters worse, attackers also started hiring call centers to cold call the victim and coerce them into cooperation. One of the latest additions to this pressure-inducing toolkit was bombarding victim customers with emails, warning them about possible leak of their sensitive information and asking them to convince the victim to pay the demanded ransom. But not all ransomware families have such fierce ambition. For example, Humble Ransomware, as its name suggests, decided to only take victims' device as a hostage, threatening to make a mess of its master boot record. This would effectively turn it into a brick or non-usable device. And as humble was humble, they only asked for $10 ransom. This leads us to believe that this ransomware family was probably after the regular internet users and not really after companies as the rest of the ransomware gangs. Now fast forwarding to March 2020, when COVID-19 hit hard in the Western Hemisphere. The numbers of infected patients are growing rapidly, as are the numbers of patients who didn't survive their fight with the disease. With lockdowns being one of the few ways how to flatten the curve, millions and millions of organizations worldwide drastically changed their work habits and allowed most of their employees to work from home. But if that many people suddenly must work from home, then all of them needed to connect remotely, right? Thus, they needed remote access. And this included access to systems that contain business, critical, or otherwise sensitive information. Systems that were never ever meant to be available directly from the internet. This change made Microsoft's service called Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP for short, into the biggest target in 2020. This small utility built into Windows operating systems allowed users to remotely access their machines with as little as their username and password. So once thousands of poorly protected environments and sensitive systems were publicly accessible and could be accessed thanks to username and password, there was no reason for cybercriminals not to try to brute force their way in. Since the beginning of 2020, over 960,000 unique clients reported at least one brute force attack attempt against their RDP connection. All in all, ESET has blocked more than 56 billion, that's billion with B, malicious RDP password guesses worldwide since the beginning of the pandemic. If you want to do the math, this means an average of 58,000 attacks per unique machine since January last year. And if those numbers aren't astonishing enough for you, then wait till you see the detection trend. As RDP became the go-to attack avenue for the attackers, and not only for ransomware gangs, but for cybercriminals in general, malicious password guessing shot up by more than 700% since beginning of 2020 and has only started to slow down recently. And ransomware gangs like to diversify. So especially when it comes to distribution of their malware, they were looking for other vectors how to get in. For example, using the good old-fashioned phishing or spear phishing. They also started hiring other bad guys to do the distribution work for them. And thanks to this trend, botnets such as TrickBot or Emotet surged to popularity as the spreading mechanism for many different payloads. And this included, of course, ransomware such as Ryuk, which is a notorious malware family that has taken a special liking and special interest in hospitals and emergency services. Another aspect that makes the situation with ransomware even worse is that the operators are technically skilled. And as they are operating like surgeons, they sometimes needed only few minutes or days to exploit recently published vulnerabilities. We have seen this in multiple cases in 2020, misusing flaws in popular software such as VPN services and even vulnerable MS Exchange servers. And all of this results in what seems to be a never-ending stream of victims whose names appear in the media almost every day, including large global corporations, financial institutions, and organizations that are part of critical infrastructure. So why do the cybercriminals do this? The answer is very, very simple. It's about money. About a lot of money. We're talking billions of dollars here. How do we know? Yep, first, the gangs like to brag about what they earn. So in a public interview, Sodinokibi gang admitted to have earned $100 million in 2020. And that is only 20 to 30% of the fee that they charge their affiliates. So the figure can go as high as $500 million. But can we believe those numbers? I mean, they like to exaggerate, right? Unfortunately, it seems that we can. Security companies that have been monitoring Bitcoin wallets used by Ryuk ransomware that I already mentioned saw $150 million being moved only by this one single gang in 2020. To understand the context or why we are calling the uptick in ransomware attacks a gold rush, it took Ryuk exactly 6 years to make the same figure, and they were probably one of the best earners if we believe what FBI is saying about them. And the average ransom demand has been growing too throughout the pandemic. Group IB estimates that typical demand of ransomware gang in 2020 was around $170,000. However, the most arrogant gangs didn't shy away from larger figures and were asking for millions per incident. In 2021, there were at least two $50 million ransom demands, both asked by the gang called Sodinokibi. Important to note, if those ransoms would have been paid, this particular gang would have made as much money as they took in during the previous 12 months. If you look at it this way, then we can go to the big numbers. European Union Agency for Cybersecurity called ENISA put a price tag on the criminal activities of ransomware, and the estimate says they made around 7 billion euros in 2018, which is the year before COVID-19 hit. Only in 1 year, the number has surpassed 10 billion euros. And 2020 will probably be worse, much, much, much worse. If other players increase their earnings the way Ryuk did, we can probably expect rapid increase in that figure. But if it will be 20 billion, 30 billion, or 50 billion, we don't know right now. We will have to wait for ENISA to give us that number. So with ransomware gold rush underway, we at ESET couldn't and surely didn't sit idle. In 2020, we focused on botnets and their disruptions. Botnets that were often crucial in spreading the nastiest ransomware families, such as TrickBot, mentioned by Alexei in the previous presentation, which was responsible for several hospital compromises similar to that one that I mentioned in Germany. TrickBot wasn't a new player on the market. It has been around since 2016, starting its career as a banking malware. But it seems it wasn't profitable enough for the attackers, and thus TrickBot mutated into a dangerous multi-purpose info stealer and a distribution channel for other malware. This made it worth our time and effort. In two back-to-back disruptions, first by US Cyber Command, followed by another one that was led by Microsoft and included also ESET, we were able to take down 94% of TrickBot's infrastructure in October 2020. This included 62 command and control servers and also 7 IoT devices, which were all used to keep the grip on the botnet. Also, we didn't expect TrickBot to go down without a fight. And as it tried to recover, it tried to compromise another 59 CNC servers. For the coalition of cybersecurity vendors, this was an anticipated move, and it was crushed again. However, there was no physical raid involved in this disruption. So no one was taken into custody, and thus TrickBot's operators kept at it and are still active even today. Another gold-digging botnet operating on a global scale was Emotet. Emotet has been around even longer than TrickBot, since 2014, and similar to TrickBot, started as a banking malware, phishing mostly for victims' banking credentials, sensitive information, etc. 6 years later, it has evolved into so much more than that. US CISA labeled Emotet as sophisticated Trojan and a downloader of other malware. Europol went even further than that and named it the most dangerous malware out there. In ESET telemetry, Emotet was ranking among the top crimeware threats throughout the year, often placing at the very top of the ranking. Emotet's operators had at their disposal more than 1 million zombie devices, which were divided into 3 separate botnets called epochs. Extensive and resilient infrastructure that allowed Emotet's operators to target organizations anywhere in the world with fear-inducing speed and effectivity. But nothing lasts forever, right? So on January 27, 2021, Emotet met its enemy, who literally kicked down its door. In a large operation coordinated between EU and US law enforcement agencies, police agents raided an apartment in Ukraine, which was one of the main centers of Emotet's operation. And what they found shows that the gold-digging metaphor we use in this talk is no exaggeration. As documented in the photos, apart from various currencies and cryptocurrencies, police agents also seized many gold bars. So much for cyber Klondike, right? After the operation, more than 700 Emotet CNC servers have been disabled and 2 criminals were taken into custody. Also, most of the million-plus enslaved devices were single-holed by the law enforcement to stop them from spreading malicious binaries further. And for the grand finale, on 25th of April 2021, law enforcement pulled the plug on this money-making machine and uninstalled it from all infected devices. Or in other words, that was the day when Emotet died. Yet other botnets, malware families and threat groups remain very well in business. So to be prepared, we would like to offer some ideas on how everyone can improve their security stance and make these gangs work harder for their money. First of all, organizations need to educate their employees. Today, one single wrong click can launch a network-wide compromise that can cripple victims' business operations for days, weeks, and in some brutal cases, even forever. Remember that anyone can be the first crack in the defenses, so it doesn't matter if you work in sales, IT, finance, or belong to the top management. Today, everyone is a target. We have demonstrated that RDP is the prime target for cybercriminals, so it is crucial to set it up properly and protect it. If you are not sure how to do it, feel free to scan the QR code that you can see on the screen and read the white paper focusing on RDP settings and protection. Another important point is to make sure that strong passwords are used not only for RDP, but across the organization and for all its systems, and that clear policies that enforce the rules are in place. Keep all your software updated. That includes operating systems, security solutions, VPNs, MS Exchange servers, as well as anything else in your environment that could be the attack vector. If possible, add other protective layers or factors to your security. For example, by bolstering the protection of your passwords by adding 2FA. Backups are also still vital, especially if you need to bounce back after an attack. Having that one crucial copy of the most valuable information can be the difference between fast recovery and a long-lasting security nightmare. Now, this is a point we cannot stress enough. Endpoint security solution is the cornerstone of your security. Thus, it is vital for you to choose a reliable and multi-layered solution that protects you from a wide variety of threats. To further improve the level of their protection, organizations should also utilize endpoint detection and response solutions, such as ESET Enterprise Inspector, which helps security teams assess risks, identify anomalous behaviors in the network, detect breaches, but also help them investigate past incidents. And on top of that, you can also add a layer that will protect you against emerging threats. To that effect, ESET has devised advanced protective measure in form of cloud sandbox called ESET Dynamic Threat Defense. Our engineers have designed EDTD to analyze new and suspicious samples and answer customer analysis requests within minutes, offering organizations exclusive access to the full power of ESET detection engine and all its technologies. So, before I go, let's return to the German ransomware case from the beginning of this talk. Investigators closed the case without naming the Doppelpaymer gang as the primary culprit behind the death of the German patient. It seems that her condition was so serious that even without the delay caused by the attack, the outcome would probably be the same. But we should view this as a final warning, because up until now, it was all about gold, money, bitcoins, but do we really want to let it reach the tipping point where we start losing human lives? Thank you for your attention, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of ESET World.